She was a destitute orphan who built an empire out of absolutely nothing. She faced total ruin when the world turned against her during a time of war. And yet, she designed her own immortality, stitching her name into history forever. Welcome to Learning English with Rassa. Gabrielle Chanel was born into a world of extreme poverty, and her early life was just a constant struggle. It got even darker when she was only 12 years old, because her mother tragically passed away from tuberculosis. And right after that, her father, who was a traveling peddler, just abandoned Gabrielle and her sisters. He left them at Aubazine, which was this incredibly strict, heavily religious orphanage in central France. Life there was just harsh. The rules were rigid, and those cold stone walls created a really oppressive environment for a young, creative girl. But, it was exactly here, surrounded by the stark black and white uniforms of the nuns, that she learned how to sew. That cold, loveless place actually gave her the needle, the thread, and the minimalist aesthetic that would eventually change the whole world.
So, at the age of 18, Gabrielle had to leave the orphanage. She found a job in a provincial tailor's shop, working as a humble seamstress during the day. But at night, she totally transformed. She became a cabaret performer, singing in these local cafes to crowds of drunken cavalry soldiers. Now, her voice wasn't incredibly strong, but her energy was just magnetic. She often sang this popular song called Qui a vu Coco, which translates to Who has seen Coco? Well, the soldiers loved it so much that they just started calling her Coco, and the name stuck. In the smoky cafes, Coco really established herself as a true rebel. She completely refused to take the traditional, quiet path that was expected of poor young women back then.
It didn't take long for Coco's charm and unique style to catch the eye of a wealthy former cavalry officer named Etienne Balsan. He actually invited her into his world, which was this highly decadent lifestyle full of idle aristocrats, expensive horses, and just endless parties. But Coco wasn't about to just be an accessory. While she was living with Balsan, she ended up meeting the true love of her life, a wealthy English businessman named Arthur Boy Capel. Capel really saw Coco's brilliant talent. He believed in her so much that he funded her very first millinery, or hat-making, boutique right on Rue Cambon in Paris. Inspired by Capel, Coco started borrowing elements from men's tailoring, taking the clean lines of his jackets and turning them into fashion for women. From that very first shop, her success was literally meteoric. I mean, women were just so tired of those tight, painful corsets that were designed by men. Coco gave them freedom. She revolutionized fashion by using comfortable jersey fabric. This was a cheap material that up until then was basically only used for men's underwear, and she transformed it into elegant, relaxed clothing. But right at the height of her rising empire in 1919, tragedy struck. Boy Capel was killed instantly in a horrific car crash. Coco was absolutely devastated. In her profound grief, she practically weaponized the color black, taking the traditional color of mourning and turning it into the ultimate symbol of everyday power and elegance. Fast forward to 1926, and Chanel introduced something the world had literally never seen before: the little black dress. It was simple, accessible, and just breathtakingly elegant. Alongside her signature perfume, Chanel No. 5, her brand developed this unmatched allure. Women everywhere wanted to feel like Chanel. She really understood the deep psychology of fashion. You see, she wasn't just making clothes, she was making tools for confidence. For example, she designed this brilliant two-tone shoe with a beige body to make the leg look longer and a black toe to make the foot look smaller. She was an absolute genius when it came to proportion and desire. But the bright lights of Paris eventually went dark. When World War II broke out and Germany occupied France, the 56-year-old Chanel made some decisions that would haunt her forever. She moved into the Ritz Hotel, which at the time was also the headquarters for the German military, and there she began a highly controversial romance with a German aristocrat named Hans Günther von Dinklage. Now, Dinklage wasn't just a diplomat, he was widely suspected of being a Nazi intelligence officer. Even today, historians debate her true motivations. Was she just seeking safety? Was it a calculated grab for power? Or was it genuine love? Whatever the real reason, this relationship cast a very dark, permanent shadow over her legacy.
During the occupation, Chanel actually made a deeply ruthless business move. She tried to use these terrible Nazi laws that stripped Jewish people of their property, to seize total control of her highly profitable perfume company from her Jewish partners, the Wertheimer brothers. The attempt failed, but the damage to her reputation was definitely done. In 1944, when France was finally liberated, Chanel was immediately arrested by the French authorities. She was brought in for intense questioning about her wartime activities, but strangely, after only a few hours, she was released. History strongly suggests that her close, powerful friend, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, secretly intervened to save her. Despite being released, the streets of Paris were just no longer safe for her. The French public was furious. She faced a severe, widespread accusation of treason. So many people simply considered her a traitor and refused to even speak her name. Realizing that her empire was crumbling and her life was in actual danger, the once untouchable fashion icon fled the country. She crossed the border into Switzerland, vanishing into a quiet, heavily guarded, self-imposed exile that would end up lasting for 15 long years. The world honestly thought the story of Coco Chanel was officially over.
Well, they were wrong. In 1954, at the astonishing age of 71, she returned to Paris. The French press absolutely hated her, calling her a ghost from a dark past. But she had the incredible audacity to stage a massive comeback anyway. She completely ignored the critics and just focused on the modern woman. She introduced the iconic, perfectly tailored tweed suit and the revolutionary quilted handbag with a chain strap, which was designed so women could finally have their hands free. Slowly but surely, the world fell in love with her all over again. She reclaimed her throne as the undisputed queen of fashion. Coco Chanel spent her final years doing exactly what she did in the beginning, working. She was a legendary perfectionist. She'd often rip apart a jacket with her bare hands if even a single button was out of place. She lived out her last days alone in her suite at the Ritz Hotel, choosing her work over absolutely everything else. On January 10, 1971, at the age of 87, after a really long day of preparing her spring collection, she lay down in her bed. She looked at her maid and whispered her final, iconic words. "You see? This is how you die." She passed away peacefully, leaving behind a name that would literally echo through eternity. All right, let's transition a bit and dive into the vocabulary from this story. Our first word is oppressive. Oppressive. This is an adjective, and it means cruel, unfair, or causing a very heavy feeling of discomfort. If we look at the etymology, it comes from the Latin word oppressus, which literally means pressed against. I want you to imagine a physical weight pushing down on you. Synonyms include overwhelming or dictatorial, but oppressive really highlights that specific feeling of being squeezed or limited, whether that's by rules, the weather, or your own emotions. Let's see it in context. First, the strict rules of the orphanage created an oppressive environment for the creative young girl. Second, the oppressive heat of the summer made working in the small tailor shop unbearable. And third, she designed comfortable clothing to free women from the oppressive fashion of the era. Notice how oppressive functions in these sentences. It conveys a physical or emotional weight that really restricts your freedom. Just like the rigid orphanage rules restricted Chanel's childhood, wearing a heavy coat or a tight corset can be physically oppressive. Our second word is rebel. Rebel. This is the noun form. It means a person who refuses to obey rules, tradition, or authority. Now, a quick pronunciation note here. As a noun, the stress is on the first syllable, rebel. The etymology is super fascinating. It comes from the Latin rebellus, meaning to wage war again. Common synonyms are nonconformist or revolutionary. But keep in mind, while a revolutionary might want to completely change a whole government, a rebel is simply someone who says no to the expected rules of their environment. Think about how this applies. Coco was a natural rebel who refused to dress like the other women in high society. Next, the young rebel left the safety of her town to sing in military cafes. And finally, her designs were meant for the modern rebel who valued comfort over tradition. A rebel is someone who actively pushes back against the status quo. When Chanel wore men's trousers or threw away the corset, she wasn't just making clothes. She was acting as a true rebel, fighting her own personal war against what society told women to do. Moving right along to word number 3, decadent. Decadent. This is an adjective that describes something characterized by excessive luxury, pleasure, or even a bit of moral decline. It traces back to the French word décadent, which actually means in a state of decay. Synonyms are indulgent or luxurious, but decadent definitely carries a special nuance. It's not just nice or pretty, it implies something is almost unhealthily luxurious. It's so rich and so focused on pleasure that it might actually be slightly corrupting. For instance, she found herself surrounded by the decadent lifestyle of wealthy aristocrats. Second,
The party was a decadent display of expensive champagne and fine jewelry. Third, despite the decadent world she lived in, she preferred simple, elegant black dresses. In Chanel's story, Etienne Balzanc's world was incredibly decadent. It was full of people who didn't have to work, who spent all their time on horses and lavish parties. Today, we often use it to describe incredibly rich food, like a decadent chocolate cake that's so good it's almost a little bad for you. Next up, we have meteoric. Meteoric. It's an adjective, meaning achieving success very quickly and spectacularly. The etymology here is quite visual. It comes from the Greek meteoros, meaning high in the air, which is exactly where we get the word meteor, a shooting star. Synonyms include rapid and spectacular. When you use the word meteoric, you are directly comparing someone's success to a brilliant, blazing star shooting across the night sky. You could use this by saying, her rise from a humble seamstress to a famous designer was truly meteoric. Next, the meteoric success of her first boutique allowed her to pay back her loans immediately. And few brands in history have experienced such a meteoric rise in popularity. You'll notice that in English, meteoric is almost exclusively used to describe a career, a success, or a rise to power. You wouldn't say you had a meteoric breakfast. It's strictly reserved for massive, fast-moving professional triumphs. Word number 5 is allure. Allure. This is a noun representing the quality of being powerfully and mysteriously attractive. It originates from the Old French allurier, which means to attract or to entice. Synonyms are charm or fascination, but allure is distinct. It's not just about obvious physical beauty. It is this invisible magnetism. It's a mysterious pull that draws people in, making them want to know more or possess something. Consider these contexts. The allure of Paris convinced her to open her most famous fashion house there. Second, even after decades, the classic Chanel No. 5 perfume has not lost its allure. Third, she understood the psychological allure of designing clothes that gave women confidence. The Chanel brand was built purely on allure. It wasn't just about the cotton and the thread. It was the dream, the mystery, and the feeling of elegance that pulled customers in. Our sixth word is ruthless. Ruthless. It's an adjective meaning having or showing no pity or compassion for others. The etymology here is very direct. In Middle English, the word ruth meant pity, so adding the suffix less literally means without pity. Synonyms are merciless or heartless. It describes a mindset where a person will do absolutely whatever it takes to achieve their goal, regardless of who gets hurt along the way. Listen to how it's used. As a businesswoman, she was known to be ruthless when defending her brand. Next, the ruthless laws of the occupation forced many people to lose their businesses. Finally, she was a ruthless perfectionist who would tear apart a jacket if the buttons were wrong. In general, everyday English, ruthless is often a negative, harsh trait. However, in the context of high-level business or art, calling someone a ruthless perfectionist can sometimes describe their extreme, uncompromising dedication to quality. Moving to word 7, controversial. Controversial. This adjective means causing a lot of public disagreement, anger, or deep discussion. It comes from the Latin controversus, meaning turned against. Synonyms are disputed or contentious. When something is controversial, society is turned against itself in debate. Some people will strongly support it, while others will vehemently oppose it. It splits public opinion right down the middle. You'll often hear it used like this. Her wartime relationship with a German officer remains a highly controversial topic. Second, it was a controversial decision to completely eliminate corsets from women's fashion. And third, despite her controversial past, her legacy in the design world survived. Chanel's life is pretty much the definition of controversial. From breaking major fashion rules to her dark World War II alliances, she constantly forced society to debate her actions and her character. Word number 8 is accusation. Accusation. This is a noun that means a claim that someone has done something illegal or wrong. It comes from the Latin accusare, which means to call to account. Synonyms include allegation and charge. Now, it is absolutely crucial to remember that an accusation is simply a claim. It is not necessarily a proven fact yet. It is just the act of pointing a finger and saying, you did this. In practice, it sounds like this. Following the war, she faced a serious accusation regarding her political loyalties. Next, he denied the accusation that he was working as an intelligence officer. Third, the public accusation of treason damaged her reputation for many years.
Pay attention to the grammatical structure here. Native speakers very often use verbs like facing an accusation, denying an accusation, or making an accusation. Our ninth word is exile. Exile. It's a noun defining the state of being barred from one's native country, usually for political or social reasons. It stems from the Latin exilium, meaning banishment. Synonyms are banishment or expulsion. Exile carries a very heavy emotional weight. It really represents the profound loss of your homeland, your culture, and your safety network. For example, to avoid the anger of the public, she lived in a self-imposed exile in Switzerland. Second, after years of exile, the designer finally returned to her beloved city of Paris. Finally, the artist painted his greatest masterpiece during his long exile from his home country. Notice the phrase self-imposed exile. Sometimes a government forces you out, but in Chanel's case, she basically forced herself to leave in order to survive. It was self-imposed. And our final vocabulary word is audacity. Audacity. This noun means a willingness to take bold, often reckless risks. It can also mean a confident disrespect. It originates from the Latin audax, meaning bold. Synonyms are boldness or nerve. Audacity is a really powerful word because it walks a tightrope. It takes a massive amount of courage, but it also means you are completely ignoring what other people think is polite or normal. Listen to the shifting context in these final uses. The critics were shocked by her audacity to return to the fashion world at age 71. Next, it took great audacity to design luxury clothes using cheap materials meant for underwear. And third, he had the audacity to ask for a promotion after missing a week of work. Now, what's really interesting about this word is that the context changes everything. In the first two sentences, audacity is almost a compliment for bravery, but in the third sentence, it's an insult, meaning extreme disrespect. Let's take a look at how this vocabulary builds across her story. Looking at her rise, we started with oppressive, representing the heavy, strict environment of the orphanage that really shaped her minimalism. Then she became a rebel, pushing back against all societal expectations. This led her into the decadent, excessively luxurious world of high society with Etienne Balsan. And from there, armed with Boy Capel's belief in her, her success was meteoric, just a rapid, blazing trail right to the top of Paris fashion. Moving into her darker era, we see the allure, the magnetic, psychological charm of her brand, which was perfectly captured by Chanel No. 5. But then the war brought out her ruthless side, her pitiless attempts to seize total business control. This was paired with her highly controversial romance with a suspected Nazi spy, which was a decision that deeply divided public opinion. Ultimately, this resulted in a massive accusation of treason, unproven in court, but still powerful enough to destroy her public standing. Finally, her legend is cemented by the last two words. She faced exile, being forced to leave her beloved Paris and live isolated in Switzerland to avoid public fury. Yet she possessed the ultimate audacity, the reckless, beautiful boldness to step back into the spotlight at 71 years old and demand the world's attention once again. This brings us perfectly to our idiom of the day, from rags to riches. This is a deeply cultural phrase in English. Rags refers to old, torn, worthless pieces of cloth, which is a symbol of extreme poverty. Riches obviously represents immense wealth. So when we say someone has a rags to riches story, it means they started their life at the very bottom, with absolutely nothing, and through talent, luck, or relentless hard work, they achieved massive financial success. Let's see how native speakers use this naturally. Coco Chanel's life is the ultimate rags to riches story. I mean, it is the perfect description for an orphan who died in a luxury suite at the Ritz. Next. He went from rags to riches by inventing a simple piece of software. And third. Despite her rags to riches success, she never forgot the hardships of her youth. It functions almost like an adjective phrase to describe a specific type of self-made journey. Now, I have a quick challenge for you. Take a moment. Can you think of a famous person from your own country or from history who genuinely has a rags to riches story? Someone who started with nothing and built an empire. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with one final thought. Looking at Coco Chanel's incredible, controversial life, what gives a brand its true power? Is it just the quality of the product, or is it the sheer audacity of the story behind it? We would absolutely love to hear your thoughts. Join the discussion with our community on Telegram at @FluentMind. Keep learning, keep pushing boundaries, and I will see you in the next